one of the things that we said is we would try to do other things than simply have debates in Speaker's Corner. Brother Akuma is someone who's got involved in Soko films, but he's got a unique and interesting story to tell that is relevant to a theme of videos that we're hoping to produce, which is talking about why people who were Muslim have become Christians. So without further ado, we're going to get into the discussion. So Akuma, tell me a little bit about your life before your conversion to Islam.
Yeah, so I was what we call a cultural Christian. From being from a Nigerian family, we grew up with some Christian principles, but nothing devout. My parents were not really devout, more doing it as a form of tradition. So you kind of clang on to it. I claimed to be a Christian then just because of my parents' faith, but nothing was real. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more about the circumstances of your life.
Yeah. You know, what you're kind of up to, where you were living, what you were doing, hanging around with.
Yeah, so I lived partly. I was born in England, lived here to about 92. Then I went back to Nigeria to live there for about 5 years. Schooled there for a little while. Went to boarding school there, so grew up quite religious. Then came back to England back in '98 and was going to a more charismatic church that believed in the prosperity gospel. And I remember being disillusioned by it when the pastor said, "More money, more blessing." And I think my mum said, "We're not going to there anymore." And I was kind of relieved by that because I wanted to play football on a Sunday.
Yeah.
So then sort of floated around and considered myself a Christian, but didn't think nothing of it.
And what age were you around this time?
I was 16.
Around 16.
Yes. Yeah.
So when did Islam first appear on your radar?
It first appeared on my radar when it became sort of, I knew there was Islam existed when I was living in Nigeria, but when it became on my radar, it was after 9/11. After the 9/11 events happened, I was 17 at the time, I remember it vividly when it happened. It seemed about 2 years later, it seemed that everyone was coming to Islam. I remember there was a lot of talk about people converting to Islam, it being the fastest growing religion. And I had gone to college now, and you're kind of looking for a structure. You're kind of looking for something masculine. And I remember some Muslims came up to me, and there was this Nigerian imam, funnily enough, I was going to my college at the time, said to me, "Oh, you can't trust the Bible, there's too many versions." And I said, "Yeah, there are too many versions of the Bible. You've got the NIV, ESV, King James." And I mistakenly took the false premise that just because you have different versions, you have different kinds of Bibles. So I thought, we have different kinds of Bibles, we can't trust it. And what was sold to me, that there's only one Quran, and it has never been changed. And I thought, hang on a minute, this Islam makes more sense to me. And that's what kind of started my journey to sort of embrace it.
So you ended up in a situation where you were not particularly well educated in your own faith, and then you were encountering another faith that was making a criticism of your religion, but at the same time was presenting itself as an alternative. And
yes,
because would it be fair to say that because you had not been formed well in your own faith, it was kind of like knocking over pinballs down?
Yeah, absolutely. Like what scripture says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. And because I was not trained in it, and some of the arguments that were presented, look at the Christian West. You know, they wage war, they say they're Christians, but look at the immorality of society. You know, sexual promiscuity seems to be rampant around society. And I thought, that is true. We claim to be a so-called Christian nation, but look at the sexual immorality, you look at the abortions, you look at the nightclubs.
So you got strawmanned?
Yes.
They basically identified all the corruptions of the West with Christianity,
yes,
and then said, that's Christianity,
yes,
why not become a Muslim?
Yes, exactly.
I'm sure you're not the first. So what was it that got you thinking about Islam? Or have you already answered that in...
Well, like I said, what got me thinking about it, because it offers something quite simple. It was more of like, we only have one Quran, one God, we pray 5 times a day. I think it was presented so simply. Because at the time, to explain the Trinity, how do I explain Jesus being the Son of God and him being God, it didn't make sense to me at the time because I wasn't educated at all. But the concept of Islam was, you submit to God, you do your 5 pillars of Islam. I thought, that just makes more sense. And plus it wasn't apologetic about its faith. It said that we're Muslims and we're proud of it. there was no wishy-washy. There wasn't watering it down just to fit my criteria. There was more to say, if you want to please God, this is what you have to do.
Okay. And so you've kind of answered, in a sense, the attraction of Islam. And so what you were faced with basically was this presentation of a weak Christian faith that's corrupt in terms of the Bible, corrupt in terms of society, vis-a-vis this strong, simple Islam. Now, in terms of your parents, were they aware that these kind of things were going off in your mind, that you were thinking about these questions? I mean, where were they as you were mulling over these kind of
like I said,
thoughts?
my parents were cultural, so they weren't really devout by any stretch of the imagination. The only person that was devout in my family was my grandma. My parents were not really devout, so in fact, to this day, she's probably, if my mom watches this, it's the first time she realizes I did convert to Islam.
Yeah.
I think to this day I've not really told her
Okay.
I did. So, Mum, I apologize.
So when did you take Shahada?
I took it.
And where, if you remember?
I took it in my college,
Yeah.
and it was probably 2 or 3 weeks after speaking to the imam of my college.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had an imam talking to you.
Yes.
You had nothing to come back with.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And you were seeing this muscular Islam vis-a-vis this wimpy
Yes.
kind of Christianity. So tell us a little bit about what it was like being a Muslim.
Well, I was embraced, quite welcomed, in fact, because I think also I wanted a network of friends as well, because I was quite lonely in college as well. So I guess when I initially embraced it, they welcomed me. I was like, wow, I finally found something that I can really identify with. Something that, I could say that I believe this, and I want to spread the goodness of Islam to the whole world.
Yeah.
So I honestly felt welcome. They call it love bombing. When you join any sort of religious organization or cult, they love you. They say like, yeah, it's great to have you. You're gonna fight for things. So yeah, it was quite good. And I remember going to what do they call this again? What's their Friday prayers called again? I've forgotten it. But when we go to mosque on a Friday, and they were talking about, oh yes, we hate the West. George W. Bush is horrible. Look what he's doing to our Muslim brothers. And I distinctly remember becoming radicalized about it, thinking, yes, I'm ready to fight. And I remember if I'd gone to that path, I have no doubt, knowing myself, if I stayed in that faith, I probably would have joined ISIS.
So what caused you to doubt?
It was something simple. It wasn't anything apologetic or anyone produced an argument. It was more of a case of something as simple as trying to pray. Now I remember when I was a cultural Christian that if I wanted to pray, I could speak in English. I could say, God, I'm going through some tough times, please help me. But as a Muslim, I thought, what do I say in Arabic? I can't speak Arabic. You're telling me to recite words that I don't know the meaning of. And that's what caused these first doubts to appear to me.
The first doubts.
Yes.
Yeah. So from those first doubts, describe the journey to the point where you decided to leave.
Well, it was more of a case of I couldn't take the rituals anymore. I'm doing all these things over and over again, and it became more of a chore than a relationship. Then it just fizzled out, and I guess in a period of maybe a month or two, I just said, you know what, this is not for me, and I just simply just walked away.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you weren't a Muslim for a very long time. How was your life after you left?
Well, like I said, I went back to my default state of just living for self, and I didn't suffer any persecution. So I'm not going to paint a story that I was persecuted or anything. In fact, the imam that converted me, by God's grace, left the college, so I didn't have to answer towards him.
Yeah.
So I think I had some friends that said, "Oh, you were Muslim for a while, now you've just converted back." They just thought I was just going for a phase. So I didn't have any pushback.
Yeah.
So I was quite fortunate in that aspect.
Okay. And how did your life? So you fell into this a default position, which most people have in the West.
Yeah.
Which is this sense of love, the God of self.
Yes.
How did you end up becoming a Christian?
Well, it was just more of a simple case of I just finished university, and I was in that point where I was scared. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had what we call an existential crisis, and at the time, this was back in 2007. There had been a lot of stabbings. There had been a lot of footballers having heart attacks, and I just had this sense that I'm going to die. something bad was going to happen, and I needed answers, and I was just literally shook to my core. And how the journey started was, I was playing semi-pro football for a semi-pro football team in South London, and a Christian reached out to me, and that's how the journey started for me.
That's how the journey started.
Yeah.
How did tell me the steps of the journey from that initial contact to becoming?
Yeah, so he gave me Luke 4 about where Jesus talked about setting the captives free, because my mind was like, I'm in a prison right now and I need something to get me out of there. And from there, I started to think things deeply. Now, I wanted help. I had some ulterior motives. I wanted a lucky charm to help me with football. So I thought, okay, let me read the Bible. Maybe it might give me some, a good lucky charm to help me in my football matches. But I started to read the Proverbs. I started saying, hang on a minute, this book has some real wisdom about this. Where has it been? It's answering my questions, the questions I've had all my life. And obviously, you enter the rabbit hole, and all of a sudden,
I get that.
Yeah.
So, how would you describe your life now? Is it perfect?
No, it's not perfect.
Still got problems?
Still got problems. Still have my struggles, with sin and my own insecurities. Even I sometimes struggle with depression. But the issue is, I have an anchor. I have a hope to lean on to. I have a situation where I have a fixed point of reference whereby if I deviate from my true north, I know where to go back to, you see, and that's what gives me the hope, you see. So despite whatever happens now, despite where am I in life, I know Jesus Christ is still there for me.
Yeah.
And it's the best feeling in the world.
So, I mean, it's fair to say that your time as a Muslim was incredibly short.
Yes, it was.
So what would you say to those people who are thinking about becoming a Muslim now but haven't yet taken Shahada?
Yeah. I would say to them is this: Christianity is true. The evidence for it is overwhelming. In fact, if you study it from an objective perspective, there is no doubt that Jesus Christ rose from the dead. There are questions that we have, and the problem, I can see that people who find Islam attractive, I can sympathize with you from that aspect, but there are answers to the questions you seek. Like Jesus said, if you seek me, you shall surely find me.
Amen. There we go.